The most breakable and unbreakable UFC records. That's what we're discussing today, guys. Across the history of the UFC, obviously, some insane records have been set, and some of these I don't think will ever be broken when you consider how modern UFC is, and some of these I think will be broken very soon. So that's the topic of this video for today. And yeah, I wanted to go through 13 different records and see who can break them and the records that I don't think will ever be broken. So let's get right into it. It's not wasting any time, starting off with the youngest UFC champion. I think this is an unbreakable record. Now, that might sound crazy considering you have guys like Raul Rosas Jr., who's 19 fighting in the UFC, but I just don't, this guy's not championship caliber, especially at bantamweight, one of the hardest divisions in the UFC. There's no way this guy in 4 years is going to climb up to be champion. I don't see it. He's very mid in the striking, but he has the best chance right now because at bantamweight, I don't see too many other guys that are under the age of 23. But if you look at the record, John Jones, youngest champion at 23, defeating Shogun for the belt back in 2011. Jose Aldo became the UFC champion after the WEC was absorbed by the UFC. He was the inaugural UFC champion at 24. Josh Barnett won the heavyweight belt back in the day at 24. Carlos Newton, 24, and Frank Shamrock, 25. The bottom three, a bunch of old heads. I mean, Josh Barnett's like mid-40s now, so we're talking like early 2000s these guys got this. But when we talk about the youngest UFC champion, I just don't see it happening, man. If you look at the UFC fighters, they typically hit their prime around age 31 to 33, somewhere in there. So to have a guy come into the UFC in modern-day UFC and win the belt at 23, like 7 or 8 years before his prime, I know there's an argument to be made that different fighters hit their primes at different times, and I understand that, but the average prime fighter is like 31 to 33. So I just don't see in modern-day UFC anyone coming along and taking the belt under the age of 23. So I think this is a borderline unbreakable record. Obviously, nothing is for certain. Some records are meant to be broken. That's the saying. But in my opinion, John Jones will remain the youngest ever UFC champion for a long time. This is not going to be broken anytime soon, in my opinion. Let's get on to the next record, which is going to be the longest UFC win streak. I think this is breakable. And if you look at the longest UFC win streak, Anderson Silva at 16, Kamaru Usman at 15, Islam Makhachev at 14, and John Jones at 13. What's insane about the Anderson Silva win streak is that Kamaru Usman was so close to tying it, man. He was dominating Leon in the second fight. Round 5, 1 minute to go. All he has to do is finish the fight, and he ties Anderson Silva's record, and Usman gets head kick KO'd with 1 minute to go. Absolutely nuts how close he was to beating the record. And yeah, man, Anderson Silva probably could have extended that record. He just got old, 38 years old, and he got KO'd by Weidman, and that was the end of that. But who do I think is going to break the record? Personally, I think it's going to be Islam Makhachev that's going to break the record. I think he's going to beat Arman in January. It's already January. I think he's going to beat Arman at UFC 311, and he's going to extend his win streak to 15. And then I could see him getting 2 more wins, man. I can see him beating Charles Oliveira in a rematch. I'll put him at 16, and then I can see him going up and winning the welterweight belt at 17. I'm counting on my boy Islam Makhachev to break the record. And honestly, if he breaks the record, there's an argument for this guy to be top 3, top 2 fighters ever. So, yeah, man. Longest win streak, 16, is quite the insane record, especially whenever you consider, I think people need to put some respect on Islam's name. And especially when you consider he's doing this in the lightweight division, which notoriously has been one of the most difficult divisions throughout UFC history. And he's doing it in modern-day UFC, where, in my opinion, the fighters are better than they ever have been. Back in the day, the skill gap was much wider, so Anderson Silva was much better than all those guys, and he fought a lot of cab drivers. But Islam Makhachev is building up a high win streak like this in modern-day UFC against good competition. So, yeah, I do think Islam will be the one to break Anderson Silva's record and extend it to 17 wins. Yeah, I don't know if he can go past 17, but I think as of now, it's pretty likely he can get 17 wins in a row. Let's get on to the next one, which is going to be most UFC fights. I think this is an unbreakable record. Listen, Jim Miller with 45 fights is absolutely insane. When you look at the top 5, Jim Miller, 45. Andrei Arlovsky, 42. He's gone from the UFC. Donald Cerrone, 38. He said he's coming back, but only for 2 fights. That's going to be 40. Clay Guida's 37 fights. Clay Guida's 43 years old, and Dana White said he should retire. There's no way he's going to fight another 9 times. Rafael Dos Anjos is 36 fights. He's 40 years old, just tore his ACL. So, and also, whenever I say these records will never be broken, I'm not counting the fighter who has them. Obviously, Jim Miller can break his own record because he's still fighting. I'm talking about no one else is going to break the record, just to clarify. But yeah, man, 45 fights. I mean, if you just look at the top 5, there's nobody even close. And a lot of the people who are in the 30 wins column, they're close to retirement. They're already in their late 30s, and they're not going to be fighting into their 40s. A lot of these guys are going to retire. So, yeah, with the state of the UFC and how fighters just aren't built like they used to be, in my opinion. Fighters these days, they want to get their bag, they want to get in and get out. Nobody really fights, it seems, for the longevity of the UFC anymore. Like, I want to be in the UFC forever and fight long. Maybe Kevin Holland can break this, but Kevin Holland's already 32 and he's not fighting as often as he once did. So I think Kevin Holland has like 20, 22 fights. I can't see Kevin Holland getting another 23 fights in the UFC, you know? Maybe it could happen, but yeah, man, Jim Miller at 45 wins, and he's probably going to extend this. I don't see anyone beating this anytime soon. Can you imagine if Jim Miller got all the way to 50 fights and then retired? That'd be crazy. But yeah, unbreakable record in my opinion. The most UFC fights. I don't see this getting broken. Let's get on to the next one. Longest average fight time. I think this is a very breakable record, and I think it will be broken quite soon. We got Joanna Jędrzejczyk with 18 minutes and 38 seconds average octagon time, which is absolutely insane that she spent nearly 19 minutes in the cage on average. Demetrius Johnson, 18:34. He's retired. He's not breaking it. Valentina, spelled her name wrong. Shevchenko with 18:22. Dominic Cruz with 18:20. Israel Adesanya with 18:18. Now, hear me out, guys. Israel Adesanya is not going to break it because he's going to be fighting. He could break it if Nasruddin Imavov goes to a decision. He goes to a decision with Imavov. I'm not sure how much that would bring his time up. But I think the most likely fighter to break this is Valentina Shevchenko, considering she is the champion. And I don't see... I know she's getting older, but I don't think Manon Fiorad's going to beat her. So I could see Valentina Shevchenko winning that fight by decision. And if she doesn't break the record of Jędrzejczyk, she'll be very close. I could see Valentina winning her next two fights by decision and taking this record. So that's why I think it is a breakable record. Just because, yeah, man, women's fights, they typically have lower finish rates than men's. That's why you see two women on the top of this list, 1 and 3, Valentina, Joanna. Less finishes in the women's divisions. They just naturally have less power, in my opinion. So there's going to be less finishes in general. But also, yeah, I just think Valentina Shevchenko is going to be the one to break this record. She's kind of a decision merchant. I know she has some finishes throughout her career, but she's fought to decision a lot of time, hence why her average fight time is 18 minutes and 22 seconds, because she's been champion for a long time at flyweight, even though she lost the belt. She's been champion, so yeah, I could 100% see Valentina Shevchenko holding this record probably by like the beginning of 2026, especially if she gets 2 fights in 2025. Yeah, she'll probably hold this record. 2 decision wins. Let's get on to the next one, boys. Most submission wins. I think this is unbreakable. Hear me out. To have 16 submission wins in the UFC is absolutely absurd, and if you look at the top 5, there's nobody even close outside of Jim Miller, and I just don't see Jim Miller getting another 4 submission wins to break this record. I don't see it happening. Obviously, Charles can extend his record, but like I said, I'm not counting the same guy who has the record to break it. I'm talking about other fighters breaking it, and I don't think any other fighter is going to break this. I don't see Jim Miller get another 4 submission wins. Damian Myers retired. Gerald Meerschaert, I don't see him getting another 6 submission wins. He's getting old, 37. He just got cooked by Reindeer de Ritter, so yeah. GM3 is not getting another 6 submissions to break the record. I don't see it. Nate Diaz is almost 40 years old. He might come back to the UFC for one more fight. Who knows, but Charles Oliveira has been in the UFC since 2010. It's now 2025. This guy's been in the UFC for nearly 15 years. And yeah, man, he's still active. So he could extend this record, which would be absolutely insane when you consider that just think about it, guys. Most guys don't even fight in the UFC 10 times. To have 16 submission wins is absolutely insane. So yeah, this record's not getting touched for a long time, in my opinion, if ever, just because UFC fighters don't fight with longevity anymore. They have shorter careers. So yeah, I think this record's going to stand. Let's get on to the next one. Most UFC total fight time. I think this is breakable. If you look who's at the top, Rafael dos Anjos, 8 hours, 43 minutes, and 19 seconds. But the issue with that is Rafael dos Anjos, I think he might extend it. He said he wants to come back, but he just tore his ACL and he's 40 years old. How does an ACL recovery look at 40 years old? I think if Rafael dos Anjos does come back, he's going to get finished in the first round, not extending his octagon time too much. We have Max Holloway, right? 8 hours, 2 minutes, and 43 seconds. Max Holloway just going to move up to the lightweight division. He's only 33 years old. He's been in the UFC for a while, but he's still only 33. I think Max Holloway is going to break this record. I could see Max Holloway being the first fighter to break 9 hours of octagon time, which is actually insane if you think about it. 9 hours in the UFC octagon straight is absolutely absurd. And yeah, man, 33 years old. So I think Max Holloway is going to overtake this record and be the first fighter to reach 9 hours of octagon time. I could see this happening like at the end of 2026. So that's my opinion. Frankie Edgar, almost 8 hours. He's retired, obviously. Jim Miller, I don't see Jim Miller getting another nearly hour and a half of fight time. I don't see that happening. I mean, the guy's 41 years old. You know, eventually his body's going to say, man, you can't do it anymore. And Clay Guida is obviously should retire 7 hours and 3 minutes. So yeah, man, Max Holloway, in my opinion, will be the one to break this record. Even if RDA comes back, I think he'll get finished really quick, not increasing his octagon time too much, just because he's old. He's coming off an ACL tear. He's not going to perform very well when he comes back. So, yeah, my opinion on that. Let's get on to the next one. Title fight wins. I think this is an unbreakable record. Let me explain why. Jon Jones, 16 title wins. I mean, need I say more? GSP's at second with 13. Georges St. Pierre is obviously retired. He's 43 years old. He's never coming back. Demetrius Johnson had 12. Demetrius Johnson's retired. Anderson Silva, 11. He's retired. Amanda Nunes, 11. She's retired. So even if Amanda Nunes were to come back, she's not going to come back and get another 6 title wins. You know what I'm saying? And Jon Jones obviously could extend his own record, but if you even look at this list, champions just don't say champion as long as they used to. I mean, even a guy like Pantoja, who's dominating his division, only has, 4 title wins? It's like he would literally have to get another, what's that, 13 title wins? That's not going to happen. This is one of those records where you just have to be so far ahead of your competition and beat multiple generations of fighters, and especially in modern day UFC where everybody's so good and skilled, this is going to be extremely hard to pull off. So, yeah, man, I think Jon Jones is going to hold this record to the end of time. Fighters are too good, too well-rounded for guys to be winning 16, 17 title fights in 2025. I don't see it happening. Win streaks, sure. Win streaks are easier to go on, but title fight wins, whenever you're having the absolute best guys chasing you at all times, it's going to be tough to get more than 16. So I think this record's going to stand maybe even forever. I don't know if this will ever be beaten, but we'll see in the future. Records are meant to be broken, as they say. As of now, I just don't see it get beaten in the next 10 or 15 years. I think this is going to stand. Let's get on to the next one. Most UFC wins. I think this is breakable. Now, it's going to be tough, but it's breakable because Jim Miller can obviously extend his record. He's at 27. So, yeah, his UFC record stands at 27 and 18, I believe, at 45 total fights. Jim Miller with 27. Donald Cerrone wants to come back for 2 more fights, so potentially 25 for him, but I don't think he's going to win. Charles Oliveira, if he wins 4 more fights, could break this record. 5 more fights, but Charles is getting older, so I don't know if I could see him win another 5. Andrei Arlovsky, 22. He's retired. I think Max Holloway can be the one to break this record as well. Listen, Max Holloway just entering the lightweight division permanently at 33 years old. There's a lot of old heads at lightweight. I mean, if you look at the lightweight division, Charles Oliveira is 35, Dustin Poirier is 36, Justin Gaethje's 36. I mean, Moikanu's 35. There's a lot of old heads at lightweight that I think Max Holloway can beat. I think he can beat guys like Dan Hooker. So I could 100% see Max Holloway racking up another, 6 wins in order to take this. It just depends if Jim Miller gets some more wins, which I think is very possible. But Max Holloway still has some miles left, and I think he can push himself to get another 6 wins or so, maybe 6. I can see Max Holloway before his UFC career ends. I could see him getting 30 UFC wins. The first guy to ever get 30 UFC wins, that'd be another 8 wins. He'd be 36, 37 years old, and he'd call it a career. Who knows? I don't know Max Holloway's UFC retirement timeline. I'm just speculating. He seems like a guy that loves to be a part of the fight game, so I could see him pushing it. So, yeah, man, Max Holloway with 30 wins, first guy to ever reach it. I could see it happening. Let's get on to the next record that I think is going to be unbreakable. Significant strike landed. This is set by Max Holloway, and he has this record by such an insane amount. I don't think this is ever getting broken. I mean, just Max Holloway, one of, if not the, you can argue that he is the greatest UFC volume striker in history. He has nearly double the amount of second place's significant strikes landed with 3,457. I mean, the pitter-pat decision man, Sean Strickland, is all the way behind with 1,400 less strikes at 2,069. Then it's down to Angela Hill, who's old, 2,036. Then it's down to Bobby Green, who's old, Rafael dos Anjos, who's old. There's nobody touching this record ever. I think this is going to be a record that might stand for 20 years from now, just because, like I said, fighters don't fight as much, and Max Holloway is one of the most insane volume punchers we've ever seen, and in order to achieve numbers like 3,400 significant strikes, you have to fight in the UFC 35, 40 times to achieve these numbers. I mean, landing insane strikes in every single fight. So, yeah, man, Max Holloway's been in so many championship fights and landed so many strikes. I mean, just against Calvin Kattar, I forgot how many he landed, but it was in the several hundreds, and it's I just don't see anybody touching this record. It's just, this might be the most unbreakable record on the entire UFC list. Just to have 3,457 significant strikes, I don't think anybody's touching this in the next 20 years, in my opinion. So, yeah, Max Holloway will be king of the hill on this stat for a long time, boys. Let's get on to the next one. We have total takedowns landed. I think this is breakable, and I think this will be broken in Merab's next 1 or 2 fights. Listen, I know Georges St. Pierre has 90 takedowns, and Merab has 85. I've went on record to say that Merab is going to lose to Umar. However, I do think that Merab can get Umar down, and I think he will. Even Umar said that he'll probably get me down. Is he going to land 5 or more takedowns? I don't know. But even if Merab loses to Umar, and let's say he only gets 2 takedowns, has still 87, I think in his next fight against a lesser opponent than Umar, he would go and break this record. So Merab Dvalishvili in 2025, I think is 100% going to break GSP's record, and he will be crowned as the new king of the most takedowns landed in UFC history. I think we can see him get into the 90s, maybe even 100. Merab, I think this is a cold take. Merab's going to be the first fighter in UFC history to reach 100 takedowns landed, which is quite insane. I know I give Merab a lot of crap, but his ability to repeatedly take opponents down is somewhat impressive. And Gleason Tebow had 84. He's retired. Clay Guida 78. He's not getting another 10 takedowns and breaking the record, or 13 takedowns. Demetrius Johnson's retired. So yeah, man, Merab Dvalishvili in 2025 will be the guy to break this record. I think this is good to be the next record to be broken, in my opinion, just because it's Merab and he's literally the king of spamming takedowns. So what else is there to say about that? Well, let's get on to the next one. Oldest UFC champion. I think this is Unbreakable. Listen, there's nobody that I can see ever becoming 45 years old, coming back and winning the UFC championship. Randy Couture did it in a time where guys weren't as skilled, and he did it at the heavyweight division against Tim Sylvia, I believe. It's just too tough. Guys are too good. Guys are hitting their prime between 31 and 33. There's no way a 45-year-old man with a cane, not even Yoel Romero, is going to come and win a title at this age. I think this is an absolute unbreakable record. Glover Teixeira came somewhat close at 42, but can you imagine Glover Teixeira winning a title a year from now? Like, it just seems so impossible. Daniel Cormier did it. He was a champion at 40. He retired. Fabricio Verdum, 38. Michael Bisping, 38. Anderson Silva was a champion until he was 38. Jan Blachowicz was a champion. He was 38 or 39. It's like all of these guys can become champion in their late 30s, maybe even early 40s, but to go all the way up to 45 and become a champion, the closest it ever came to happening was Dan Henderson. And that was because Michael Bisping cherry-picked him out of the rankings. He was number 13 at middleweight, I believe, in 2016. Michael Bisping wanted revenge on Dan Henderson. He picked him, and Dan Henderson beat the crap out of Michael Bisping. And if it was damage-based score, and Dan Henderson would have officially became the oldest UFC champion at 46 years old, but it wasn't damage-based scoring at that time. So Randy Couture holds onto the record. And in modern-day UFC, I don't see a single UFC fighter at any point winning a belt at 45-plus years old. I just don't see it happening. So, yeah, I think Randy Couture might hold this record forever, just because there's no old man with a cane come and take belts in 2025 to 2030. You know, I'm just calling it now, boys. Let's get on to the next one. Most decision wins. Listen, I think this is breakable. We got the king of decisions, Belal Muhammad. This guy is Belal Muhammad, because I spelled his name wrong. But Neil Magny's the king of decision wins at 14. He could extend that, but I think Neil Magny's cooked. I don't think he's winning any more fights. He's old. He's been chinned a bunch. It's time for Neil Magny to retire. Brad Tavares arguably could break this record. Brad Tavares is only like, 35, 36. He can get a couple bottom feeder wins and break this record. So I think Andre Arlovski, Georges St. Pierre at 12. But I think the most likely to break this record is going to be Belal Muhammad or Brad Tavares. Probably Belal Muhammad, because let's be real, guys. If he does beat Shavkat or anybody in the division, there's like a 98% chance that Belal is going to win by decision. He's not. Belal has like one finish in the last 9 years. So listen, I give Belal a lot of crap, but if you want to talk about one of the best decision fighters to ever live, we're talking about Belal Muhammad. This guy is the decision king. Like, you know how hard it is to beat Belal Muhammad by decision? Who's the last guy to do it? Jeff Neal, way back in the day, but prime Belal Muhammad, and there's nobody beating him by decision. So yeah, I think this record is going to be taken by Belal Muhammad, maybe in 2025. No, he's not going to fight 3 times. 2026, Belal Muhammad. At the end of 2026, I think Belal Muhammad will overtake Neil Magny for the most decision wins. Maybe that's a hot take. Maybe that's a cold take. I'm not sure. But, yeah, Belal, remember the decision, Muhammad is going to take this record. And let's get on to the last one, where we got the most submission attempts. Surprisingly, despite Charles Oliveira having the most submissions, Jim Miller has the most submission attempts at 49. Charles Oliveira trailing him at 46. Chris Lido at 31. Joe Lozon at 29. Damian Maia at 27. Let's be real, guys. If it wasn't for Charles Oliveira still fighting, this record's never getting broken. Jim Miller, 49 submission attempts is absolutely insane. Charles Oliveira is still fighting, so I think this is a breakable record. Charles is a guy that attacks submissions every single fight at least once. So I could see Charles in the next few fights attack a bunch of submissions and break this record. Charles and Jim Miller, I think, will both get to 50 submission attempts. It's just who's going to get higher in the 50s. I think Charles will break this record, and I think he'll hold this record as well. On top of having the most submission wins in UFC history, we also have the most submission attempts. And yeah, I could see this record getting broken late 2025, early 2026, depending on how much Oliveira fights and the kind of fights he has. But yeah, That's it for the UFC records that are the most breakable and unbreakable, guys. Let me know what you guys think. Give me your opinion in the comments. Are there any other UFC records I didn't cover that you think can be broken or never can be broken? I didn't include every record because obviously this video would be 10 years long. But yeah, man, I appreciate you guys watching as usual. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. I stream every single day, guys. Come out to the streams and tell your boy hi. And yeah, man, that's it for today's video. I'm out and peace out.